This is Buffalo, What's Next? I'm Jay Moran.
I'm Bridget Jaipaul-Valenza.
And I'm Dave Debo. If ever there was an issue that demands more discussion now, the racist massacre at Tops Friendly Markets on May 14th is it.
You know, America has a long, deep, rich history of racism brutalizing black communities.
But where does it go from here? What does our community need?
We must work and teach our children.
What issues just aren't being addressed?
As long as we keep doing the same thing, we're just sitting ducks for the next mass shoot. That's all you can say.
This is a new program. Every weekday, we'll set aside this hour to hear from the community about issues that can no longer be held back.
We need to make a concerted effort in our nation, in our institutions, and yes, in our family.
And this is Dave Debo. Coming up later on the program today, Quinnae Thompson will share her recollections of the May 14th Buffalo mass shooting, and Mike Farrow will also be here. He's the lead singer. This is a great segment coming up. He's the lead singer of Farrow, and he'll talk about the role that music plays in delivering an anti-racist message. But first, with us now, Ekaete Bailey. She is a community organizer, and she's behind the Buffalo Niagara March for Peace, A Cry for Our Lives, a local march for our lives in solidarity with D.C. and marches nationwide. They plan tomorrow to pull together a rally that'll go from Jefferson and Glenwood to Jefferson and Riley, and then end up with a demonstration near the top shooting scene, near those makeshift memorials. It'll happen tomorrow, beginning at 10:30 and last until noon. Ekaete, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Dave. I just want to clarify, it's actually June 11th.
Saturday. I am so sorry.
That's okay.
Let's say that again.
Saturday, June 11th.
So it is not tomorrow. It is 1 week from tomorrow. Very good.
Saturday, June 11th.
I apologize.
That's okay. Saturday, June 11th, Jefferson and Glenwood. We will meet. The march will go for about 3 blocks, and we will stop at the memorial site. It's funny because you introduced me as a community organizer. I suppose so.
Okay.
Brand new to this. The only reason that I'm doing this is because of what happened, in my neighborhood. And then what happened in Uvalde, just trauma upon trauma. And I, for one, cannot.
You can't stand by anymore.
Sit idly by.
Okay. What do you picture the goal of the march and the rally being?
So March for Our Lives, let me just kind of backtrack a little. March for Our Lives is a national organization that was started by 2 individuals, a brother and sister, who survived the Parkland, Florida shooting. They were in the high school. They were students of the high school. So very young people. They started this organization because they said never again, never again. And unfortunately, this has happened, 4 years later on this massive scale. So Buffalo is so different because not only was it a mass shooting, it was also a domestic terrorist attack against black people.
So we need to deal, you say, with issues of guns and issues of racism.
For sure.
Okay.
The overlapping issues. And so the March for Our Lives in particular, they have specific points of their mission. And one of the things that really grabbed my attention was not only are they looking to hear and see the youth rise up and do something different, but they're willing to partner with people of all ages, and they want to expose the gun obsession that is unfortunately prevalent in our country. Not with everyone, but with enough people where guns are being glorified over lives, in their opinion, and I hold that opinion as well. So the goals for the Buffalo March there's 4 goals. Number 1, to honor the victims and the people most impacted. So there are so many people connected to those 13 people who were shot, and of course the 10 people who were killed.
Right.
It's just incredible, the connections. And of course the families and loved ones first and foremost. We will not forget. We will not forget. The other 3 goals are awareness and support for universal background checks as it relates to purchasing guns, assault weapons ban, and the repeal of the Protection of Lawful Commerce Act. The repeal of the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, PLCAA. Now, that is a law that says that we cannot sue the gun industry, dealers, or anyone in relation to the misuse, quote unquote, of a firearm, which we all know happens every day. It's just, it makes no sense that we cannot sue.
I want to go back to a soundbite we played last week on the absolute very first debut of this program. The first soundbite we played on this series was from the Reverend Julian Armand Cook at the Macedonian Baptist Church at a service that happened the very next day after those shootings.
I want to be clear that while I am so glad that we are all here together, our goal today is not for another kumbaya moment. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. We need sustainable movement.
How does a rally like the one you're planning convert from that kumbaya moment into the sustainable action that he's talking about?
Yeah, so I see it all connected. I am a woman of faith. I have been praying. I organized prayer walks, in 2020 with other partners. So this is not just about me and what I do. Mm-hmm. There are so many people that are supporting this as well that just don't want to speak, and that's okay. So I believe it starts with prayer. Me personally, it starts with prayer. Prayer is the sustaining anchor. Hope is the anchor, but we have to have additional strategies. And so I agree with the pastor. We have to have movement. We have to have movement. And so when we talk about a march, right, it can seem as though, what's that really going to do? A single march, perhaps it won't move the needle. However, I, for one, have learned so much just organizing, just helping to organize. I did not know about that law. I'm sure there's hundreds of people living in this community who have no idea about these laws that are out there that are basically, we cannot hold these folks accountable, who are selling these weapons. And of course, the narrative is it's guns that kill people, it's people who kill people, not guns who kill people. However,
if the people didn't have the access to the guns, you would argue. It is
both.
Yeah.
Period. Yeah. They're telling half of the story. And they also will say, oh, well, they could just go to, somebody's back trunk and get the same type of weapon. Not so. They would have done that if they could.
Okay. Talk about your connection. You said this is your neighborhood.
Yeah.
You were at home, presumably, when this all unfolded?
I was actually not at home.
Talk about that day.
Yeah. So my husband actually works about a block and a half away. We'll kind of sometimes use the same vehicle. So I dropped him off in the morning, 10 a.m., went and hung out with some friends of my daughter. So I was in the town of Tonawanda, actually, when this happened. And what's interesting is my husband, called me right around 2:38. And I said I couldn't talk to him at the moment. And he had just heard about the shooting, and he was just about to go over there to get something to eat. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know how close it was. I thought maybe he was going to go around noon to get something to eat. No, he was going to go over there at about, 1:45, 1:50. He would have been in the store. He's the same age as several of those men that were killed. Mm-hmm. And it's just awful.
This is your neighborhood.
Yeah.
And you say that you'd never really done the activism thing before.
Not to this level.
But this meant so much that it pushed you over the line?
Yes. And Uvalde.
All right. Tell me about something you mentioned earlier where you said you truly believe that guns are glorified in our life. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
So I personally have done my best to ignore guns, but I know that we cannot ignore them anymore. It's one thing to have a handgun and a shotgun to hunt. It's another thing to have access to AR-15s and the like. And what they do to people that's not a regular gun. It is absolutely horrific. And I do not believe that civilians should have access to that, or they should go through extreme training and psychological counseling before they can have access to a mass, like a weapon of war like that. So just the little research that I've done, people, most people are, generally responsible, but they treat this thing as if it's a toy. You know, they go to the gun range and they shoot and they have target practice. Okay. But they seem to be in love with this piece of equipment. And I don't know any other recreational activity where you're using the exact same tool to shoot a target that was used to kill children and elders. I don't know of any other recreational activity where that's okay.
The New York State Legislature just last night voted on a series of measures that the governor has said she will sign. In New York State, they're looking at making sure that semi-automatic weapons now will require a permit. That includes a background check, and that these permits will not be given to anyone under 18. In light of what you've said, that's got to be a step in the right direction. Do you like that?
That's a step in the right direction. That's a step, like you said, there's steps, right? Stepping stones. We need to do more. I would like to see that at 21. You know, teenagers, their brains are still developing. There's a whole lot going on there. As well, permits, okay, that's good. Like I said, step in the right direction. But I just feel like there's more that can be done to at least protect the citizens, a little bit more. It's not going to be perfect. We know that, laws won't stop everything. But we've seen in other countries where they have, these regulations, the mass shootings have gone down.
Some of the other things the new measure will do will increase micro-stamping. Bullets will have a way to be traceable.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. I think that they should ban the sale of certain types of magazines. There's no reason for people to have access to certain types of bullets there's no reason for it. Not for target practice, not for any other reason for them to have that many bullets in one weapon. It just makes no sense.
Micro-stamping is part of it, but also the sale of body armor. This new law, which is about to be signed by the governor, possibly even today, maybe as we speak, will restrict the use of body armor pretty much for anyone but law enforcement or related use.
Will restrict the use of body armor?
Yeah, you couldn't go into a store, as the alleged shooter did, and buy body armor unless you had a legitimate reason to buy body armor.
Mm-hmm. That's good. However, I do think that would be a lot easier to get than an AR-15. In my opinion, I think that just based on, the little research I did on those two individuals, their social skills weren't great. So I don't know that they would be able to get a gun in the black market, but they'd probably be able to get body armor. And if we're restricting body armor for everyone, then what about the safety of those who would wear body armor for other reasons? I'd have to think about that. It really restricting magazines, restricting access to AR-15s and those types of weapons of war, and checking school records as part of background checks.
All right.
If they checked the school records of both of these individuals, they would have not been able to purchase these weapons.
That is another part of what's sort of proposed. They're saying we need to beef up the red flag laws. As you know, in the case of Peyton Gendron, they are saying that he made threats at his school a year ago and that should have triggered the red flag law that pulled his access to guns. That didn't happen. The new law that, again, could be signed later today would allow any individual officer or the district attorney to file those requests to have those guns removed. Mm-hmm. You like the idea?
I do. It would take a lot of due diligence and, my question would be who will be checking to make sure that this is happening?
Yeah. As it exists now, I think the process is there for the red flag law, for the removal of guns, but it's not at the level of perhaps any individual officer. This is structured such that a officer who sees what happens doesn't need to go up a chain. He can just say, hey, let's start the process to look at this individual's guns.
It's a good start.
And the last thing it does is it looks at social media. It will require, it won't violate the First Amendment, they say, but it will require social media companies to put protocols in place to self-monitor hate speech and then put some sort of procedure in place to react to it as it's uncovered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We definitely good, but we definitely need to do more with social media and the video game industry. There's so much. There's so many layers. People who watch the video, I will not watch that video. But people who watch the video say that it seemed like he was in a video game, right? So we know that there's violent video games out there that are conditioning people's minds, and they don't even realize it, especially children. As far as what you just said, yeah, that's a good step, but I do believe more needs to be done. I mean, there's underground, chat rooms and things where people are making plans, and there must be ways with the advanced technology that we have to infiltrate this kind of thing.
Your stance on video games intrigues me because I think of something like Grand Theft Auto, which is filled with imagery of people using guns, and it's prevalent. I have 2 sons. They have both played the game. They are not mass shooters. I remember once when my son was fairly young, I said, "Hey, tell me about that game. What are you doing there, kid?" And he said, "Don't worry, Dad. I know it's just a game," that he's not necessarily going to go out the next day and shoot someone. You really feel video games have a role?
Absolutely.
Tell me more.
So not every child has the family structure, the understanding, the psychological safety, the mental health to play video games, and specifically to play those types of video games. And so, that could be the argument for anything. Most people don't do this. Most people don't do that. But the few that do, all of these things are adding to the problem. Yes.
Ekaete Bailey is with us. She's the organizer of a March for Our Lives on Saturday, June 11th, 10:30 to noon. It's going to start in the neighborhood of the shooting at Jefferson and Glenwood, march to Jefferson and Riley, and then assemble near the makeshift memorial at the top shootings. We'll give out a way for people to find out more information about that at the end of the program. But if you'd like to grab a paper or pencil now and be ready to write that down, that would be a good thing. This is Buffalo What's Next. We're talking about the issues in the neighborhood after the top shooting, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about the neighborhood. Years and years ago, after one of the other mass shootings, I talked to Professor Robert Spitzer. He is a professor at SUNY Cortland. He's the author of at least 5 books about gun control, including one of them called The Encyclopedia of Gun Control. This guy has done a lot of research on the topic, and he told me something that I thought was interesting, still sticks with me today, that in terms of the politics of the country, gun control is often portrayed as Republican versus Democrat or conservative versus liberal. His philosophy was that's not accurate, that it's really rural versus urban, that it's really hunters versus those who have seen gun violence firsthand. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's definitely some political affiliations with those groups, but, everybody's different. It's all about your experience. So as a Black person, I experience this very differently than you, even if you did live on the East Side. So people need to acknowledge that and at least try to understand that. And the problem is that people don't want to do that.
Tell me more about that, because to me that's a fascinating little nugget.
It's empathy.
I have never been around guns much. I have never had a relative or a neighbor killed by a gun. I'm betting you cannot say the same. By
the grace of God.
And maybe I'm stereotyping.
God, yeah, you are.
Okay.
That's okay.
No,
by the grace of God, I have not.
Okay.
But again, these are all of my, not direct, these are all of my community members. Like, these are elders in my community. They matter to me. So I cannot think of one person in my immediate family that was, my grandfather was killed in a civil war. I don't know if that was by gun violence because I was not born.
Sure.
I'm half Nigerian, but I am American. I was born here. So yeah, my family has definitely had, unfortunately, violence, not because of urban issues, but because of civil war. So I do want to say, though, Dave, that often people say, marches, what is that really going to do? There's so many examples throughout our history of where marches made a significant difference. If we look at Selma in 1965, the Civil Rights Act had already been signed in 1964, but they were still marching for specific reasons, specific purposes. The fact that it was televised and people could see the brutality of how these people were treated, that caused significant change and it caused action. When we look back at FDR and how Black people could not apply for government positions during World War I, believe it was, and they threatened to march. Just the threat of a march he changed that law. So, to say that people coming together to say, that we want to see change is ineffective is actually what people do, I believe, to either A, say that they don't want to do anything, or B, try to stop you.
To minimize those who do.
For sure. Sure.
Lastly, we are roughly out of time here. How do people find out more about this particular march? Is there a website you can refer?
Yes. So if they go to marchforourlives.org, we are listed as the Buffalo March, and we'll update with more details as soon as possible. There is a Facebook link there. If you go to Facebook and you look for Buffalo March for Our Lives, there is an event page with a ton of details, and here is a text option. If you would like updates for the march, you can text 81010, and then you would text @March 4 BUFF. So @March 4 Buff, but it is the number 4.
All right, and you text that to 81010.
Yes.
Ekaete Bailey, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Coming up next, Mike Farrow, the lead singer of Farrow, on the role of music, delivering anti-racist messages. And then, right around the corner, Quinnae Thompson reflects on the day of the shooting with Bridget Jaipaul-Valenza. Stay with us.
Watch, listen, engage, play, and learn with Buffalo Toronto public media stations and our weekly newsletter, The List. Sign up to receive the email at WNED.org and find out the best shows to watch, the great music to listen to, the important news you can't miss, and the many ways you can engage with our public media family. Sign up now at WNED.org.
Donations come in many forms: a sustaining membership, a one-time gift, even that extra vehicle you no longer need. Learn more about the advantages of donating a vehicle. Here's how. Go to WNED.org/vehicles.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter @WBFO or email us at news@WBFO.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
Hello, you're listening to Buffalo What's Next. We're talking about what led to the Tops shooting massacre, problems on the east side, and how to fix the issue. Thank you for joining us. I'm host Bridget Jaipaul-Valenza. We're joined today by Quinnae Thompson, better known as Peaches, from Peaches and Keys Master Barbershop and Hair Salon on Jefferson Avenue. Peaches, thank you for joining us today. You have been through a lot.
Yes.
How are you doing?
I'm taking one day at a time. That's all we can do, and trying to recover. I don't think we could never recover, but just trying to learn how to, deal with it and make it better.
You have been in business for 20 years. That's a long time. Were you always on Jefferson Avenue?
Yes.
Okay, so in various forms, you've seen certainly changes in the neighborhood over the past 20 years. Tell me how it was and what it looks like now to you.
Well, when I first started back the 80s, early 80s, it was not too many businesses. I actually seen business come and go, but then I also seen it growing on certain part of Jefferson. I was on the lower part, but I seen it actually get more and more build up slowly. But it's actually too slow, because I think it should have been, more building. But even when Tops was put into, that was a big change. And then banks coming in, because I know when I first came to Buffalo, Jefferson was the place where everything was, until I heard my parents and was saying how it was a riot or whatever, and everything was burnt down and stuff like that. So they're trying to get it back up, but I think we need more and more businesses and stuff to be built.
You used to go to the Tops,
yes,
on Jefferson. it's more than a grocery store, though.
Oh yes, because I mean, it's a place where we can go, and it's it was convenient. Go just run down the street while you got somebody under the dryer, pick some things up, then come right back, have some get a little bit of groceries while you doing it in between, and then you have people that you see in the community that you get to talk to, and so it was like a not just a grocery store, but just a place where you had run into a lot of people that you know and communicate with, and just even other people that was in business on Jefferson. So it was like a family store. You know?
Yeah.
Yes.
More than a grocery, but a place to meet and to see people, and word of mouth.
Yes.
And it's very much a family.
Yes.
There. And so it's like running into your cousin.
Yes. Yes.
May 14th. You were at the Tops.
Yes.
Moments before the massacre. Tell me about that.
Well, I was, my son had just dropped my granddaughter off, which is 7 months. And I had my daughter that I raised, Miracle, and she's 1.5 years. And we were, she needed some milk. And I had a customer, so I decided while the customer was under the dryer to run down to Tops, because I have other stores, but when you have WIC, you only can go to certain places, and I couldn't drive way out to Walden, to Walmart or anything like that, because I had someone under the dryer. So I had to get somewhere quick, and I go down to Tops, and I go in to get her milk with the WIC, and when I went in, my thing was to go in there and get the WIC, because I know every time I go in the Tops or whatever, I'll be like, okay, I need this, I need that. Next thing you know, I've got a whole cart full of things. But because I had someone under the dryer doing their hair, I said, I'll get the milk and come out. And as I went and got the milk, seen a couple of people I knew and checked out, and that's when I ran into Aaron. And he was talking to me. He started walking me out, talking about my event I had on Mother's Day weekend, the Magician's Ball. And he was happy and saying he wanted to come to the next thing that I do, and letting him know when I'm doing another concert or anything. And he's saying how great that everybody's talking about it and everything. And he loved Blue Magic. You know, he said, I won't miss another show. And so when he was walking me out, he was talking to the baby in the Miracle. And as we was walking out, that's when I also seen the jitney guy that knows my sister. Because he used to be jitney for years. Because I remember when Bales was in Central Park Plaza, and he was jitneying in. My sister used to work in the bank, so he was like, "How my girl doing?" And I said, "She doing good. She was here for the weekend. She back in Virginia." He said, "You make sure you tell my girl I said hi," and not knowing, not in seconds later that both of them was going to be gone. So I walked to my car and told them bye, and I see them soon, and got to my car, and I was putting my granddaughter on one side of my car in her seatbelt in her car seat, and then I came to the other side and took my daughter out of the cart and was putting her in the seatbelt. I mean, in her car seat. And as I was doing that, I heard this young lady ask me, "Was I Miss Peaches?" And I said, "Yeah." And she was like, "My mom on the phone." And I said, "Who's your mom?" And she told me, you know, her mom's name. I don't want to miss people's names. Mm-hmm. And so I left my car door open, and I went to the phone, and I started talking to her mother, and she said, "That's my daughter. She recognized you. Virginia recognized her." I said, "I didn't." She said she's waiting for her dad that's inside the Tops, and that's why she was in a lot. Mm-hmm. And I said, she was telling me, "I meant to call you and tell you how I enjoyed myself for the, you know, seeing Blue Magic and stuff like that." And I said, "Okay." I said, "But I got my granddaughters. I'll call you later. I got somebody under the dryer." And so I gave her daughter the phone. I went back to put my daughter's seatbelt around her, and I felt someone pulling up behind me, and I looked, and it was this guy with a helmet on, and it was really hot that day. And then he had these gurgle-like glasses. And I looked at him, he looked at me, and my daughter was smiling, and I told her to sit back, closed the door, got in my car seat. As soon as I drove to the end of the lot, I heard boom, 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 all this noise. And I was like, "What is that?" And I turned left, and there's a light right there, and it was red. So I stopped, And I looked over the tops, and I seen people running, and I just seen a bunch of smoke. So I couldn't really see exactly what was going on. But then, so I was going to pull over, but then I heard it again, and I just zoomed down Jefferson like someone was chasing me. And that's when my phone rang, and my girlfriend called me back and said, Peaches, are you still at Tops? I said, no. She said, my daughter just called screaming and hollering, saying that somebody's shooting, killing people in Tops and in a lot and all in their cars. I said, no, I pulled up. I heard it, but I didn't know what was going on. She said, my daughter's phone cut off, dropped. So she didn't know what was going on. I said, call the police. So I called the police. It was busy signal. And I don't know if she reached the police or not, but I couldn't get her for like 3 days. And I was worried that I didn't know what was going on. And when I got back to the shop, and my customer was like, wasn't you just at Tops? And he said, oh my God, I'm glad to see you. I thought, and I said, and we started looking at the phone. And then I didn't even realize that the guy that pulled up behind me was the shooter, until they showed his face and said he had a helmet on. And I said, that's the guy that was pulled up right here. And I looked right at him in his face. And I haven't been the same since.
Just incredible and harrowing. I think we assume sometimes that we can recognize the face of evil, that we can look at somebody and say that person, that's a bad person. That person is going to do harm to me or to someone. Is that even a thing that crossed your mind when you looked at his face?
When I looked at him, something was weird about, but I didn't know what it was. I got a weird feeling. I was like, he got a helmet on, but at the same time, what's been going in my head is, could I have done something to stop him? Then I was like, was it her smile, my daughter's smile? Mm-hmm. Was it because of the kids? It was a lot that been going through my head. Could I have did something to help?
I don't think that anyone could have done anything to help at that point, because the shooter seemed like he was ready for what he was about to commit.
Right.
There has to be a bit of guilt there for you, though, right?
Just not just that I'm grateful. I'm grateful. I thank God every day that I'm still here.
It's okay. I'm Bridget Jaipaul-Valenza. You're listening to Buffalo What's Next on WBFO. We're talking to longtime Eastside business owner Quinnae Thompson, better known as Peaches, from Peaches and Keys Master Barbershop and Hair Salon on Jefferson. It's difficult. These are difficult conversations. These are difficult recollections. How does racism make you feel now? Do you feel differently than you did before May 14th and to now?
Well, I knew I experienced racism, once in a while, not a lot, because my family, my granddaughters, I have all kinds of different. My granddaughter is Filipino. My daughter is mixed. My son is mixed. My grandkids is Puerto Rican. My other grandkids is Spanish. So when you see my family, you be like, and we love each other. I've never been erased. And actually, when I was in the service, grandchild in the service, that's all I grew up with, was Caucasian. I didn't even realize we had different colors, or never realized that we were different skin color, till I came to Buffalo. And going to started school, that's when I experienced that we were different colors, because I never realized it until I got to Buffalo. And it hurts because we bleed the same. We have to go through the same. We have to live the same. We have to deal with the same things. And to know that someone hates like that is beyond my thoughts. I could never think like that, or I could never imagine why someone would hate, and I don't even phantom that, because we are people.
We're all human.
Yes.
What do you want people to know when it comes to systemic racism that would affect being able to open a business, being able to get an education, be able to get a business loan?
Well, actually, when I always say that even when Hillary Clinton came and I spoke with her, she came to Golden Cup. I'm right next door, and we all talked with her. And I actually brought up to her, I said, we need more grants for minority folks to be able to start a business, because so many of us have ideas and gifts and we want to start a business, but it's so hard. And I said we should have a starter business. It's like when you get a home, your first time home, they give you grants that you can get. They should put that in place for someone that wants a business and give them a chance. And I said, because I never had a grant or a loan. I worked 3 jobs to keep my business going.
It's important to, I think, have that foundation, to have that support. We have been, seeing since May 14th a lot of slogans around Buffalo on social media: Buffalo Strong, Buffalo Love. What does that mean to you?
What that means to me is that we all is affected. There's more just the family members, but it's a lot of people that was out there that saw it, that actually looked like me. We saw it, so it affected us. Then the community, it affected the community. So when we say Buffalo Long, Buffalo Strong, that means we should come together and make a difference. We should come together and speak about it, not just talk about it, but do something to help make change. We don't speak up enough. We don't. We affected. We are the victims, but it takes the victims to sometimes God have us things to go on, happen for us to make change. And situations happen, we have to turn it around and make it for the good.
In speaking with some of our guests, one of our guests yesterday had, I'd asked him, what should he do? What should the community do? And he did push back and say that, we are the victims here. We don't have an obligation to fix things. We are victims. You wouldn't expect the victim of a heinous crime to come up with the solution. But I think there's something also to be said about having people come in and impose what they think is the right thing for a community.
Okay.
So people, even though you are a victim, you still need to talk. You have solutions.
Right. Yes. Okay. See, that's what I was saying. Sometimes things bad happen. We victims. It takes us to make change, not sit back and say we're the victims. Then that's falling back and letting the person win. You can't. And in order for them not to win, we need to step up and speak about what we think that could make changes, and step up and try to make those changes. Sometimes it takes 1 or 2, the community, to come together, not just to talk about it. And okay, we done went through the moaning part. Now we got to come together and start. If it takes writing letters to the president, if it takes change have to be done. We have to stand up and now be the victim and change these things.
Peaches, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your story. I think it's important for people to be able to hear that certainly there's a way to move past. There's a way to not forget and to remember and honor. But there's also change that needs to happen.
Yes.
I'm host Bridget Jaipaul-Valenza. Up next is Jay Moran with Mike Farrow, lead singer of Farrow, talking about music and anti-racist messaging. Stay with us.
Sometimes we miss our morning alarm, then we miss our morning news, and the whole day is off. That's when you can listen to the WBFO Brief Podcast to catch up on the day's news and get back on track. Find it every weekday wherever you get your podcasts, and then like and subscribe so you never miss the award-winning journalism of WBFO's news team.
The next time you meet with your financial advisor, ask them about making a gift through your will for Buffalo Toronto Public Media. You may have the means to leave an inspired and lasting gift to the station while achieving benefits for your estate. For more information about leaving Buffalo Toronto Public Media in your will, contact Colleen Miller at 716-845-7031 or cmiller@WNED.org. Thank you.
You're listening to Buffalo What's Next. There are several ways for you to join the conversation. Send us a message now on Twitter at WBFO. Email us at news@WBFO.org or just press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app and leave a comment we can use on the air. We're here for you. This is Buffalo What's Next.
And good morning, and thanks for joining us here on Buffalo What's Next. And with us, Mike Farrow of the band Farrow. We've had you on WBFO recently, but I want to remind folks that Farrow is Farrow. And you can find out more about their music at
farrowband.com.
There we go. But we're not necessarily here to talk specifically about your music. We're going to talk about some of the meaning behind your music, Mike. And that is one thing about what Farrow brings. It's very interesting. It's a great story. We obviously have talked about it before. Just 3 years ago, you guys weren't even together, and now you're producing songs that have great musical texture to them for sure. But at the same time, there's this huge undercurrent of meaning behind your music. Can you describe it?
Yeah, as a band, I started listening to some of the music that we were making, and it became very clear that I couldn't write just happy songs. I think that joy comes from a place where it's honest about the pain that it's in, specifically being Black and having Black joy. Is a place where you have to be honest about the pain and the landscape, but then not necessarily be brought down by it, but allowing the joy within the community and within each other to overcome what is really around us that tries to push us down.
Black joy. Let's expand on that just a little bit, because you're the first person to kind of say it in that framework. But what you're saying is that part of that is just an inherent pain that has been here for generations.
There's a long history of racist policies and things that have affected the landscape of Buffalo. The way Buffalo looks, even the way the music scene interacts, is from policies and things that really separate and isolate people. Just the 33 separating those communities. All of these create this landscape that's oppressive in a way, and not in a way. It's oppressive,
right.
And it keeps people really in a place where connecting is hard, and joy comes from that connection. And so, Black joy specifically is a revelation of just energy of saying, I'm not going to be brought down by the things that are around me. I'm going to persevere. I'm going to connect, and I'm going to love and not just survive, but enjoy each other as we are going through this journey.
As you say that, I'm here, all of a sudden, flashes of stories and comments that I've heard in the last 3 weeks from Black people who live in Buffalo. There's anger, but there is, and understandably so, but at the same time, there doesn't seem to be a violent undercurrent to it.
I think the reason that there's not a violent undercurrent is that the violence that's being perpetrated is the violence of white supremacy. And it's usually framed as this love versus hate thing, and we need to fight hate, when really it's about the connection between us and the disconnection between us. The violence comes from this disconnection. It comes from this fear of being taken over, of being replaced. And as a Black community, we're just trying to be okay. Like, I ain't trying to kill nobody. I just want to live. And just this idea that living is all we want to do, and being able to provide for our family, protect our kids when they go to the store. Like, these are things that we want as a community. And so, yes, there's anger, and yes, there's mourning, and there's lots of hurt feelings, broken feelings. But there's also, with that, the element of we can connect together, and we can work together, and we can still laugh, we can still rejoice, we can celebrate the lives of those that were lost.
There's also, you related to me a story about a little girl inside the store when the mass shooting occurred. That is heartbreaking because of the type of expectation that she had.
Yeah, when I read the article, just her speaking about, I wasn't afraid for myself. I was afraid for my mom who was across the store. This kind of understanding, especially because the East Side is so violent, that this is not the first mass shooting in that area. There has been shootings. There have been lots of killings. And so it's now that it's in a racist lens, we're able to see it. But the killings and the violence, they're all still a part of that same system. And it's all still a part of bringing and oppressing people. So when there's this expectation of violence, of course the kids are prepared. People are prepared. There's a reason why it was the elders that were killed. It's because the young and the able-bodied are prepared. They're ready to duck. They're ready to run. They're ready to do all of these things because they've been so oppressed and beat down in the first place. And so it's tragic. And that's why my music, I haven't had to write new songs. Right. I haven't had to prepare a new song at all because I've already been writing about this. I've already been saying it.
You know, Mike Farrow, that's something we did get into a little bit on the phone yesterday, just that idea that I was curious. I thought, well, because before the music, you were a poet. Obviously, you're still a poet. You're a writer. It's the same. It's not the same thing, but there is a connection there for sure. And it just seemed to me that after 3 weeks of this, all of these ideas and such would be coming to you. But that's what you said. You foreshadowed what was going to happen.
I mean, so because I write about social justice and I write about white supremacy and how capitalism works and interacts within that, because these are the themes of my songs, of course, I'd written a song about the food desert on the East Side.
It's called?
Breathing Air. And I wrote it and I said, food is hard to find as much as there's honest living, and we all have an excuse not to do better. And I was talking about literally the pain that was going on that side of the city before it ever happened. So I don't have new pieces to write. I don't have new songs to sing. I'm singing the same song that I think Black people have been singing for generations. And it's a song that says we want connection. We want to be able to feed and keep ourselves safe. And the current landscape, we can't do that. We don't have the things to be able to do that. So I guess for me, it's me calling out saying, hey, we need to work together and not in some weird happy, peace, love, and harmony movement, but as in we have to do the hard work together, changes that won't feel comfortable, changes that will go against the expectation.
When it comes to your songwriting, those insights that you have, are you getting them from just being around people? Are people telling you these things? Because the food desert concept has become cliche almost in the last 3 weeks, hasn't it? It existed long before that. At the same time, who was talking about it?
I mean, a lot of the people that I interact with, a lot of the artists, I think the creatives, have a responsibility to speak the truth. And so a lot of the truth telling that I've heard from my peers, from other writers, and just in the general sense that there's a movement of people who are discussing the underlying ecosystem that's causing this to birth. That's causing this growth of pain, and it's causing this rage white rage that's really dangerous to the Black community across the country. And so there are people that are trying to excavate and get to the bottom and the root of what's going on. And through that, we've talked about these things. I mean, I've talked endlessly about food deserts. I've gone into bodegas and I'm like, there's not a fresh fruit or vegetable to be found. And how that affects a community and how that affects obesity and diabetes. And so there's this underlying, oh, yeah, they're just fat and they're lazy and all of these things, when you're like, there's an underlying ecosystem that are giving these outcomes. And so I hope that this is a moment where we can pause because of the great pain and anguish. I hope that we can look at the pain and anguish square in the face and say, okay, now it's time to do something different.
You know, Mike, very easily we can all find ourselves getting outside our zone to a certain extent, but the name of the show is Buffalo What's Next? So what could be next? I mean, you know, we're talking about working together. Again, that's a nice sounding thing, right? We all want to feel that way. I know I do. The people around me want to feel the same way. Feeling is one thing, doing's another. What do you think can be done, whether it's a simple thing or a larger, more complicated thing?
I think simply it's connection. The distance between the east side and the west side is great. The distance between the east side, west side, and the suburbs is a completely different world, different culture. And so it's a lot of breaking down those cultural barriers. That does not mean that there should be a sudden influx of white people showing up to Black spaces, because those spaces are important for the community. But at the exact same time, it's making new spaces, creating more opportunities that allow the transfer of ideas and people. I know I do an open mic on the west side, and sometimes it's hip hop, sometimes it's rock, sometimes it's a guy that just wants to slay his electric guitar by himself. You never know what you're going to get, but open mics and open poetry slams and open artistic things bring people together if we're able to communicate well about them. And you would think with social media, being able to communicate to almost anyone, anywhere would help this, but it doesn't necessarily happen. So it's going out, supporting Black artists. It's going out, going to events that, you know, you might not necessarily go to, but they're for everybody. It's really starting to engage with each other in tangible ways where we're interacting, because Buffalo is segregated. It's physically segregated. So, yeah, fighting that segregation.
I just want to make sure then the open mic then on the west side, when is that, every week? What is it?
It's at the Gypsy Parlor every Wednesday from 8 to 11. And the variety of people that show up, it's really? You never know what you're going to get. I've had full poetry nights. I've had where everyone's just making and speaking poetry. It's open mic, so it could.
And
be
who's coming?
I don't know. There's so many.
There's
folks.
so many different people.
It's just
all colors,
all
ages.
colors, ages, and age-wise until 10 p.m. It can be any age until 10 p.m. Then it's because it's a bar. It should be. They should be gone. But yeah, all ages, all skill sets, and those areas allow for connection. It allows an opportunity for people to, you know, start to get to know each other in a deeper way. I think music in the same room with each other that you all get to experience does a softening of the heart and opening of the mind. And so, which is part of the reason why I do music. I think I could write 1 million poems, and if I write one good song, it can do just as much work, unfortunately. But in general, yeah, there's
a lot of poets out there just got mad at you.
I know. I mean, I wish.
But it's,
I mean, but that's also the idea. Like the big change for me, what's next is changing the landscape. It's really that desegregation, which is hard work. The work of desegregation is hard work, and it's not easy because there's no trust between either side. And so to build that trust, it's finding common spaces, common places to really develop relationships and friendships, and especially with people not necessarily of your same class, race, or religion.
Mike, I'm also interested in your band Farrow, talking about the types of songs that you have, and the lyrics are inside. Now, I'm one of these guys. I hear a good hook, I just listen, and bop along because the lyrics can just fly by me until I hear them about the 50th time, maybe. But your lyrics, they hit pretty hard when you do sit down and hear them. How about people in these live performances that you do? They connect with those. They hear them. What kind of emotional responses do you get? Let's say, again, because you are calling people out. You're calling segments of society out. Some people don't like to hear that.
Yeah, there's been some really hard looks, hard conversations. A few people have been verbally angry about it, but most people, like you said, don't pay attention to anything
Sorry
but
to say
the
that.
hook. No, which I mean is nice. I try to make really catchy hooks for the reason of I want you to dance and have a good time, and then if you take a minute to actually pay attention to what I'm saying, it says something that's meaningful, and it says something that maybe challenges the way that you or another person sees the world. So yeah, I always try to make sure that the meat of a song connects to some kind of issue, unless it's a love song. I mean, I still write a love song or a breakup song, but I spend most of my time writing and thinking about the world that I want to see and the world that I want to create. I think it's really hard to imagine an ending that's good and happy if we literally aren't doing that. We're not doing the work of imagining how would it look like for Buffalo to not be segregated, and not be segregated in a way that not desegregate in a way that displaces people, but desegregate in a way that empowers people. What would that look like? And instead of imagining this is what's going on and staying in what's going on, taking where we're at, excavating the hurt, getting all the wounds looked at, seeing what's really harmed, who needs help, and doing the work of not just saying, okay, here's a Band-Aid, you're good, but saying, hey, what can we do to imagine it all working out? What would that even look like? And before we can even get to how to get there, we have to at least imagine a greater or a better way of interacting with each other.
Tomorrow, it'll just be 3 weeks since 10 people were killed at the Tops on Jefferson. Any signs of I'm sure there's sparks of hope and people saying nice things and such, but anything that gives you that sense of maybe optimism moving forward?
I don't know. The pain that is within the community was already there and is now deeper. And there's a lot of organizations that have been trying to work with the community for years and years and years. And I don't know necessarily if even those organizations are equipped to do the really hard work that needs to be done. And so, yes, there's hope in that we're breathing air and we have the opportunity to make change at any point. We do not have to be stuck in the same routes and routes that we've always been in. But at the exact same time, I don't think we're mourning. I don't think we're collectively mourning at all. I think there's pockets of sadness and pockets of like, let's just skim over this, let's move on, let's move past it. And so that collective mourning where we all as an entire city, east side, west side, suburbs, a whole county, the whole group of us, if we can come together and say how sad we are together and that we're not okay and really get to the bottom of that.
Mike Farrow of the band Farrow, farrowband.com. Find out more about his music. You've got to come back and talk to us again soon, all right?
All right.
All right. This has been Buffalo What's Next on WBFO and WBFO HD1. Buffalo, WOLN, only N, and WUBJ, Jamestown.